Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar titled Proving Tech Training ROI for Stakeholder Buy-in. My name is Greg Schwartzkopf. I'm the Chief Customer Success Officer for Cloud Academy. I'm going to be hosting and facilitating today's discussion. Before I introduce our panelists, a couple of housekeeping notes to share. First, the webinar is being recorded and it will be shared with you when it's available. If you have any questions throughout the discussion, please feel free to submit them in the Q&A portion of the attendee panel. If time allows, we are going to have some Q&A live session. If we aren't able to get to your questions, we'll try to get answers to you a little bit later on via email. You can expect a brief survey, and we'd really love it if you would provide your feedback because it helps us improve the overall webinar experience for future webinars. So today we're going to really get into and dig into how to improve the worth of tech training. As I talk with a number of customers across Cloud Academy and beyond, it tends to be a common theme and oftentimes a challenge. How do we describe the business case, quantify the value of a learning program? And so that's today. We're going to explore some ideas, some strategies, some approaches that our panelists both execute as well as envision for the future, with the goal of really being able to articulate the ROI of training. So without any further delays, let me introduce you to our panelists today in alphabetical order. We have Abella Camry. She's a Managing Director, Head of Skills, Learning and Development, and the Dean of Cloud at JP Morgan Chase & Company. We have Dr. Sonal Modi, Vice President of Learning and Development at MasterCard. We have James Wiley, Learning and Development Director, Customer Service and Support at Microsoft Corporation. Unfortunately, Stacy Rivers, Dr. Rivers, who was planning to join us today, was unable to at the last moment. But you can follow Stacy Rivers on LinkedIn, subscribe to a newsletter, and stay in contact with her. And we hope that she's able to join us next time. So let's jump in. I'm going to ask each of the panelists in the same order that I introduced them. Tell us a little bit more about yourselves, what your role in the organization is. Tell us a little bit about your learning program, excuse me, and give us some high-level goals of the program. We're going to dive into the details of metrics, but help the audience understand your point of view, where you're coming from. So, would you start?
Thank you, Greg. Really appreciate this opportunity. I just want to say hello to everyone who's joining. A very important topic, particularly today, and with just the way the industry is evolving. So my role, I'm really responsible for our skills transformation here at JP Morgan, particularly our technical skills. So I spend every day obsessing about how we drive fluency across the entire bank. So that's all 308,000 people at JP Morgan. And then how we drive proficiency for our technical staff. So think about our engineers, our scientists, and whatnot. And that's everything from defining skills, identifying competencies, pulling through to targets and requirements for roles. But at the end of the day, it's really building a culture around learning, a culture around skills, and putting infrastructure that enables our lines of businesses to take the accountability and the responsibility to train their workforce. At the end of everything, when we think about just the skills of the future, the workforce of the future, we've pivoted to a skills-based model, really to be able to meet the demands of the future so that we can be agile and also so that we can provide equity.
Okay, thank you, Abella. Dr. Modi, if you will.
Thanks, Greg, for this opportunity. Hi to everybody. I'm Dr. Sonal Modi, and I manage and lead the Enterprise Technology Academy globally for MasterCard. Predominantly, we try to focus on key job families and the skills within the key job families. Because it is a technology, enterprise-wide technology academy, my target audience are primarily all kind of engineers, the engineering teams at MasterCard, and there are flavors of them. There could be software engineers, there could be BizOps engineers, there could be security engineers, infra engineers, and a variety of them. We focus on ensuring that we prioritize what matters, complete alignment with the business, understanding the strategic priorities, and ensuring that we are building skills and capabilities which are aligned with the business needs. So definitely learner centricity is something which we are focusing on. We create a very purposeful and pragmatic and personalized learning approach for our learners. Learner is always pivotal and always kept at the center stage. And around that comprises the learning ecosystem, the learning strategy, the business goals, and also strategic alignment towards all kind of learning outcomes. So that's my role, taking care of engineering capability development at Mastercard, aligning to the needs, aligning to the business goals.
Okay, thank you. And James.
Great. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of the viewers. As my colleagues had stated, our mission is very similar at Microsoft. I lead the technical skilling and onboarding team that supports our customer services and support team. These are a group of engineers, both full-time employees as well as delivery partners who work on behalf of Microsoft. We've also pivoted to a skilling model to understand what types of cases come in for our products, what types of skills are needed to solve those cases, and how do we build modularized content to support these engineers to understand what is the best approach in taking these cases so that they can solve these expeditiously and to the customer satisfaction.
Very good. Okay, so what I've heard so far from all of you is a desire and maybe some varying levels of accomplishment of tying learning and skills in particular to business outcomes. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what some of those business outcomes look like and how you're measuring them today. I think everybody wants to associate the effort, the investment, the time spent in training to something that has tangible results. But for your businesses, what are those tangible results? And to what extent are you measuring them today? What are some of the KPIs, metrics, OKRs, depending on the terminology that you use, that are in place or that you're building today? James, I'm going to start with you on this one, then I'd love to have the others chime in as well.
No, it's a great question. So at Microsoft, we follow OKRs, the objectives, key results. All of the objectives that we have, the key results would be for support, throughput. How fast can I get through a case to take on the next case? How many cases can I take in a day, in a week? And we want to make sure that we do this because the other piece is customer satisfaction. The quicker I solve your case, the quicker you're back to using our product and the happier you are, right? And so these two factors, so throughput and customer satisfaction, are two KRs that we look at. And then the objectives that we have are, how do we develop training to prepare these engineers to take these cases, right? So historically, there's a queue. And if a case comes in, it just gets routed to the next available person. Now, where we're headed at Microsoft is what we call intelligent assignment, right? So when you consume content that has skills tagged to it that are relevant to specific types of cases, we can then route those cases to you because you have that skill to solve that case, and you could do that faster, right? And you could take on more cases. And so these are kind of where at Microsoft, how we see the combination of skills folding into these KRs so that we can correlate skilling to business impact.
So the things that we do in business are usually driven toward, there's a lot of outcomes, right? But in business, it's about shareholder value. It's usually about revenue, costs. And I think what I heard you just describe, James, is using skills to drive operational efficiencies, which should have some cost implications, right, in terms of profitability, being able to do it more quickly, do it more efficiently. But I'm guessing then there's also a customer experience, customer satisfaction, more people wanting more long-term with Microsoft as a result of a skilled and highly efficient process to leverage those skills. Is that fair?
Absolutely, yes.
On the other hand, tell us more about your outcomes and how you're measuring.
Yeah, I'd love to take a different approach, just sitting from my lens and where I sit. And so, my role was really born out of understanding that our vision and strategy really was bold. Really, it was predicated on technology and our ability to deliver on our technology vision. A lot of that strategy, obviously, as we all know, it's the people. Our people are our most important assets, and a skilled workforce is what we would require to deliver on that strategy. And so in thinking about the business outcomes, a lot of what we're doing is, in skills transformation is trying to assess the strategy, sit with the leaders, the business leaders across the firm, and recognize, what are the skill sets that will be required to deliver that strategy. And if we have that skill sets in-house, what does that look like in the market? But knowing that the team that we have is the team that we need, what are we doing to empower and deliver that? And so the outcome there are multiple folds. One obviously is to deliver on the strategy, right? Delightful experiences for our clients, speeds to market, working within the right governance and controls framework. But in the advent of data, AI, and ML, we are democratizing data. And in democratizing data and wanting to be fast with our delightful solutions, it means that our data owners, our businesses themselves needs to be fluent in data and need to have some of the skill sets that traditionally you wouldn't feel that the business should have. And so that in itself is an outcome that we are trying to achieve. And we can go into a few more details in bringing that down through to metrics that James had discussed. But a lot of my time is spent sitting down with our OCs, our operating committee leaders, and business leaders across the firm, including technology, to understand how we tie skills directly to the outcome, which is again to provide delightful experiences for our clients, to secure the firm, and to of course secure our clients' assets, and just be and just to continue having that competitive edge.
That's great. Dr. Modi, how about you? How are you
Sure.
measuring impact?
Right. So, Abel, I completely agree with you. That's a very similar approach that we take at MasterCard. Very deep conversations with our business stakeholders, ensuring that we understand the priorities right, understand through deep conversations whether learning is the only solution to solve the kind of problem that they have on hand. So we kind of investigate that in detail because not every problem can be solved only through learning programs. Therefore, a consultative approach of finding out what's that we are looking at, what does our 2024 landscape looks like, or what does our the last quarter of 2023 looks like, what should we be prioritizing, what will actually create an impact. And we definitely focus on outcomes over outputs, because it's very important for us to understand gone are the days when we're looking at how many people are getting trained, what kind of technology, this is a stack, let's get them trained, because most of us have the opportunity of leveraging digital platforms. But today, the dynamics is different. It's not only about having platforms available and then saying that we do transformation through all kind of jazzy platforms that we hold. It's very important for us to understand that when we talk about transformation, it cannot be only through platforms. It's more about what does our as is landscape looks like, what do we envisage to do in the future, what are the kind of skill gaps, are those skill gaps inevitably going to be resolved through learning offerings, or are we going to take a different approach. That's the approach that we take when we define our goals and focus on very very specific stuff, asking very eluding questions which will help us to kind of provide a solution, which will help and see the result in form of impact and outcome. That's our way of operating at MasterCard. So we have guilds, we have business units. Needless to say that business and organizations thrive primarily on the talent landscape, right? The competent talent landscape. Therefore, building that every day, continuous learning opportunities, very specific skill roadmaps, skill journey maps that we create, which are very job specific, role specific, is something which we focus a lot. So that because at MasterCard, there is one difference that we do, and I think most of you would hire experts. Therefore, making them realize and understand and acclimatize to the MasterCard environment. How do we implement this technology stacks at MasterCard? How do we put privacy, data privacy at the topmost priority? How do we look at security aspects? And within the given frameworks, how do we operate in the most efficient and optimized way is something which we focus on.
There. Would you like to hear more about like what measurement looks like today? So I think I understand now what's important to you, but how are you collecting the information? How are you sharing the information? Who sees that information? Who cares about that information? What do KPIs and reporting look like?
So the current metrics that we are tracking is basically compartmentalized into three areas. One is the learning effectiveness, where we speak about relevance of the courses that we offer, programs that we offer, either in instructor-led or digital kind of format. Second is the applicability. Are they able to learn something live, hands-on kind of an environment, and then take that learning and implement that directly on the job? So what is the applicability quotient that we are deriving? The third is basically outcomes. I was not able to do this, but I'm able to do this because of a very specific curated content that I'm going through. And what is a proficiency that I was at level 1. Am I actually moving the needle to level 2 or level 3? So that's the pillar of learning effectiveness that we are measuring. And then we are also very focused on learning culture. How are people adopting? We might curate content and content, but are people leveraging that? And there are some readings, some observations that we have from our data points that adoption happens when the things are relevant, they are crisp, to the point, something that they can take onto the job and easily implement that. And therefore, the learning culture parameters that we look into is basically revolving around either adoption, course completion, how many repeat learners are coming onto the platform and leveraging those kind of curated content that we are offering, or the instructor led programs that we are offering. And of course, non mandatory engagement. Like, there are some things which are mandatory and therefore people come and do it, but there are so many other stuff that we make available which are very precisely aligning to their skill families or job families. Are they really taking that? So what we try to do is look at, okay, these are the strategic priorities that were defined by the business, eluded from our conversations. These are the programs that we have curated, developed, offered. Are people taking in that respective job families what they are supposed to take? Is targeted learning happening or not? That's what we measure. And last but not the least, the learning efficiency piece, where we look also at platform experience. How many clicks does a person has to do in order to actually retrieve the information that he needs, or a course that he needs, or a snippet of micro learning that he needs to? Ease of use, and also, the content that gets refurbished, revamped every now and then. So basically, learning effectiveness, culture, and efficiency are the three metrics that we are currently successfully tracking. We are moving beyond that and looking at next steps, but that will happen only in 2024.
Okay, thank you. Others?
Yeah. So on the Microsoft side, we look at consumption. I think everything has to start with consumption, right? And this piece doesn't necessarily give you a skill. The intent is that, hey, you are consuming a piece of content to gain a skill. But the actual business impact is when you apply the skill and you see metrics move, right? And so we start with consumption, and then we start to track, okay, based off this consumption or lack thereof, did we hit the mark? What is the net satisfaction score, right? So we put surveys out and we understand, is the content relevant? Does it meet the need? And then finally, we take it to that next mile to say, for those who've consumed, how are your business metrics compared to those who haven't, right? And then based on those, that's where we could either drive further consumption because it's headed in the right direction, or we go back and we have to tweak the content because maybe it missed the mark, right? And so looking at these metrics helps us, push and pull levers to make sure that we are absolutely hitting the mark.
So looking at actual employee performance, it sounds like comparing and monitoring some of your operational KPIs, volume, ticket speed, customer, doing like a comparison. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Yep.
I'll just add a little to that too. Very much like, the two speakers before me mentioned, but I think that given that my role is very much in the transformation space, I'm part of the Global Technology Chief Operating Office. Like with any initiative, we like to think through what the metrics will be, or we talked about outcomes, what outcomes we're trying to define, and we'll try and define and baseline that before we actually go ahead and deliver whatever skilling or upskilling initiative. I have a team that we're the skills acceleration and adoption team, and think about that team as a SWAT team that comes in because there is something that needs to be done quickly or done effectively for a reason. And so what we tend to do first is identify the cohort of individuals that need this upskilling and the reason why. And so in identifying the folks that have it, and sometimes it's not the obvious group of people. You know, it might, you might think that it might be the engineering skill set that needs to be upskilled, but when you look through who is actually hands on keyboard or who's delivering the outcome, it might be a different group of employees. So we start with identification, and then we baseline what the outcome should be. And when I say baselining, we might be delivering a skill. We understand where what process is being impacted by that skill, and what tool that is being evidenced in. And so we go into that application or tooling and look at that and pull out the metrics there for a baseline. At the end, for us, skilling or learning, the impact that we have is our ability to impact movement in that space. And so I'll give a real example, a real tangible example. Obviously, with the rise of generative AI and whatnot, everyone is out there, looking to bring to market a compelling use case that will provide value. And with the work that we've done to try and democratize data and access to information for our business, so many lines of businesses are bringing up different use cases. There are different things around not just the speed to bring it to market, but be able to bring it in adherence to our responsible development practices, also within our controls framework. And so when we identify the group of people that go through, we baseline and see how they're doing that work right now, and then we'll put them through upskilling. We look through at the end to see how fast they moved versus their peers, or how they were developing in the past. And movement can be anything from, okay, even if they haven't created a use case in production, is that moving through the development environment? So is it moving from development to test? And if it is, how quickly is that happening? And then also, obviously, our standard practices that are out there. We have different parts of our engineering tool chains where we measure if they're using observability, if they're using our standard practices. It's such a huge firm for us to stay compliant and also be able to go through change management effectively. It is important that our teams are building in a scalable way. And so we have a lot of standard practices that we put in place. And so making sure that not just teams that have done this before, but our new engineers coming to place, or those who we have now given opportunity through upskilling, are able to build and deploy in accordance to our practices. And so that's a way we also do it here at JP Morgan, where I would say that sometimes the metrics are not defined. I mean, no set of initiatives for us have standard metrics. But as we understand with our user or our business what they're trying to achieve, we can work back through work which we call discovery to understand what we should be baselining and what we should look for to be moving after we implement the learning.
Yeah, that's great, and thank you all. I think what I'm hearing, a consistent theme is, tell me if I'm on track with this or not. There's a lot of metrics in the organization today, and so Abella, to your point, there may not be standard metrics, but metrics exist. And I heard James, you say the same thing, and Dr. Modi the same thing. So those metrics exist. We're tracking them just as a standard part of doing business. But it sounds like what the three of you are doing are leveraging a set of those metrics and looking through the lens of skills and what is the impact of upskilled versus baseline versus control on those standard metrics to really measure the impact quantitatively, right? To be able to say, when we do this, there's an outcome or an output or an influence that we're able to determine it's going well or perhaps not, right? But you're able to measure the difference. And I think that's great for our audience, right? Maybe not, you don't have to reinvent, a whole host of metrics, leverage the metrics that are important to you today, but have the ability to make those kinds of comparisons based on the profile of your teams and the skills that they possess. Is that fair?
Yes.
Yeah.
Tell us about qualitative aspects of measuring ROI. The more subjective, I've heard a survey mentioned, feedback loop. How important is that, the overall theme of how you look at ROI for your programs?
I'd say that, when it comes to L&D, there's always going to be a challenge to put direct correlation of consumption of content to business impact. And surveys is one way to say, did you learn something? What was your baseline going into consuming this piece of content? And do you feel like you've learned more to be applicable to your role afterwards, right? And so that is qualitative. And we do a number of surveys. In fact, we do new hire surveys to say, hey, based off of your first month's performance, how much do you attribute the skill, the knowledge that you have to the training that you had when you came in, right? And so we're trying to associate the qualitative piece of skilling to the impact that you have in the business. And surveys is one way that we do this at Microsoft.
So I strongly feel that qualitative learner feedback is very critical because it helps us to get insights into learning experiences, like how do people perceive the learning? Are they finding it relevant, like what James just mentioned? But it's also important for us to understand and take clues on whether it is aligning to the learner needs, the job that he's performing. Are the programs actually helping him to, kind of build up that skills that he needs? Perceived value. We are able to also measure perceived value of the programs. What does a user or a learner feels about the programs that is attending? Engagement and satisfaction. These are some of the other metrics that we could actually find out from the qualitative feedback that learners provide us. And most importantly, what I have seen is, can you read between the lines and understand contextual understanding of programs that we offer through the qualitative? Kind of completion rates. Are they recommending this program? Sometimes NPS scores that we provide, a lot of stuff. And we do qualitative feedback in multiple ways. It's the standard traditional method of digital surveys, but on the spot kind of learning polls. We also do video testimonials of people who are willing to give us very open feedback, good, bad, ugly. We take that feedback, try to work on them. We also talk to the people managers who have nominated those people and try to understand people who have attended these programs. Do you see any kind of classical difference? Do you see that we need to change the course curriculum or do course improvements or course corrections? So there are multiple uh, tangible benefits that we get from qualitative learner feedback, and that is very closely monitored and looked at Mastercard as well.
And does that help you with your business case for the program? Is it
Yeah,
significant enough
it
to
does.
justify continuing and investing?
It does. It does.
Greg, when I was introducing myself, I talked about part of, my role is, not just building the infrastructure, but the culture of learning. And, the piece that you're talking about qualitatively, we have to pay attention to that because it's very important, from everything from creating learning agility, a culture of learning, a culture where learning is celebrated, is rewarded, but more so, just a space where we are able to create different modalities, right? People learn in different ways, and it's really an imperative on us to be able to identify how people learn and provide infrastructure and a space so that people can learn at their own pace, but still be able to consume the learning and the skill set that is required. So while I feel that they're two both valuable things, quantitative and qualitative, obviously learning in itself is an investment, right? It's an investment for a certain end, and that's when the quantitative comes in. But also learning in itself is what sets the value proposition for your organization. And for us, we strive for domain eminence. And so, for anyone, a value proposition would be: if you come at JP Morgan, you stay and grow a fantastic career, or you leave more skilled and more valuable than when you came in.
That's great. And what I think I heard in there also was qualitative feedback as a means to gauge modalities, effectiveness. James, you said content relevance, right? So while someone may feel good about learning, that's great, that's important, right? Dr. Modi, you said that as well. You're also saying, but we really have to look at the outcomes. We have to be able to look at job performance and organizational performance, and are we saving money? Are we making money? But it feels like the qualitative aspect is maybe a way to verify, validate, but also recalibrate, make sure that the learner has the right mix of content modalities, opportunities to get to those, perhaps more quantifiable business outcomes.
I would also say it's to sustain. It's also to sustain it, right? Learning should be enjoyable. I mean, I have a voracious appetite to learn. Yeah, and so you want to delight them, right? And so that feedback is also just to sustain that pace, that hunger to learn. I'm in technology. Most of I believe we're all pushing the technical path and learning, and we become obsolete very quickly if we're not continuously learning and honing our skills. It doesn't matter what role you have. And so technologists as a whole like to learn. They like to do different things, but we have to make sure that it's not boring or stale in the way that they're consuming it. So the more delightful those experiences are for them, we as an organization gain from that too.
I agree. I like that you brought up the fact that different modalities, different people learn in different ways. This is, one of the things that we brought on at Microsoft and why we're modularizing training. We know that people can't sit down for 1 hour, 2 hours to consume a training. Sometimes it's a 30-minute break where I have to take a training. Additionally, maybe I like to talk to an instructor-led training or a virtual instructor-led training. Or now these days we have AI. I can have a bot training me, right? So, as you said, we're technologists. We like the new innovative ways of learning. And at the end of the day, it's consuming the content, right? How do we get people to have that enjoyable experience so that they come back and consume more content?
What do you feel each of you is missing today from your business case, from your ROI? I'll call it equation. Like in a perfect world, if you could define the ideal ROI mathematics to say this program is working, it's benefiting the business in the way that we want. What are you aspiring to? What don't you have today that you would like to have? And perhaps what are some of those plans to get there?
I'll say integrated infrastructure. And so a lot of my time beyond just articulating the need, right? So you're sitting down with the stakeholder to really, figure out, is learning what you really need? And sometimes you do start with learning, and then you go down the path and realize it's the operating model that's the problem. And so let's then, through discovery, fix the operating model, because you don't want to reinforce the bad behavior through learning. However, the real thing is, as we're talking about moving to skills-based model and threading the needle from skills all the way to outcome, and I talked about tying it back to find the tools or the applications where folks are evidencing those skills. Now you hit architecture of your organization or your models and the integration points, right? It would be so seamless if I could have these cohorts of individuals going through, and if I'm asked at any given point in time, what level of skills or what skills at what proficiency level have I delivered, I can do that now, but I can tell you it takes a couple of people and time to do that because they're disparate systems that I'm trying to reconcile to get that information from. But if there was a way, despite having APIs, that was just seamless, that as folks are going through and consuming those trainings, I can quickly identify, right, what they're getting and who's getting it and how they're applying it. Perhaps, as I talked about, right, speed to market is a big thing for us to deliver those experiences. I can realize where in the cycle, starting from acquiring skills or learning to actually integrating it back into the business, that we're missing time. And if it's the integration piece where I tend to suspect that's happening, how many people have upskilled folks and they're not actually applying the skill set in their role? Then you have a quantitative argument to make back to your stakeholder to say, we have delivered the skill set. Where you can close the gap is really in your integration. And so perhaps we should map supply and demand, put them closer together so you get that ROI quicker.
And if I could ask a question on that, is it integration of the learning systems? Because I know you all use multiple systems, platforms, modalities, Cloud Academy and others for learning. But does that also include, Abella, integration of the systems that would be used to monitor the outcomes and the impacts?
Yeah, it's the full ecosystem. So everything from the LMS, when I talked about integration, so I actually use integration from after you've learned and applied the skill set. So I know I validated that you have the skill, but I want to see you practice it in the system. So we have tool chains, we have different. I'll just speak from an engineer's point of view. I can see that too with my data scientists. But we have different tool chains that I can see as our engineers are doing their work, the evidence, whether they're committing code or they're pulling things through a pipeline, right? That's not integrated. That's work that is to be done. But imagine the full ecosystem from learning through to delivery of that skill in the workforce being tied together. That could be very powerful.
Yeah, integration of systems or data, right? Because all of these systems are creating data, and to be able to connect the dots, like you said, from that entire journey to the outcomes, to be able to have that kind of perfect measurement, if you will. Okay, what else? What else are we missing from an ROI standpoint?
So, Greg, for me, I think the ROI equation is a very important component of net benefit, right? We always have been looking at net benefit, the cost spent, and then, kind of find out a percentage. But the new way of thinking is, can we relook at net benefit? What does that mean? Okay. One is increased productivity, enhanced speed and accuracy, time to market. But could we also look at additional elements like long term benefits, long term skills that you're developing, proactively, predictively, you're building those kind of skills? How well are you doing that? Improved skills, benefits, and kind of outcomes that you are going to kind of envisage, which will align to the business goals. Are you enabling talent fungibility by doing your programs? I think there are multiple other factors that we need to reconsider when we talk about the net benefit concept, I mean, the net benefit component of the ROI equation, and how do we bring in competitive advantage by learning offerings, etc. So there are many parameters that are missing today. We look at very myopic view of it as, are we doing something right? Are people able to, kind of bring that on their jobs and do it faster? But I think beyond that, there are many things that we need to reconsider.
Yeah, and I'd say that from a Microsoft perspective, absolutely the infrastructure and reporting is one of the biggest challenges we have. Every day, something new is being built, something new is being adopted, and how do you plug that into the system so that you're capturing those specific data points and how do they contribute to the overall scores, right? And then I'd say that um, the basics, the dedicated time for learning, right? Like we carve that out. We're intentional about that. But at the end of the day, unless it's a required compliance training, um, who has that veracity for learning? Who wants to learn more to better themselves, to highlight a different career path potentially, or enhance the career path you're currently in? Um, Trying to show the value of learning and having people prioritize the time to learn, that's where it all starts.
Are there any decisions that you're unable to make or you struggle to make today based on learning and skills that you would like to be able to better make? Operational decisions, operational efficiencies that we haven't talked about yet. Any aspirations there? And I'm thinking decisions on resource investment, decisions around go-to-market. Dr. Modi, you just mentioned competitive advantage, right? So we're talking about data, we're talking about connecting the dots between learners and outcomes, and data is obviously, the opportunity to make decisions to improve the business. Curious if there are some decisions you'd love to be able to make through improved data, ROI, insights, etc.
Yeah, I'll say that maybe it's slightly bigger than a question, but it's related. Is that we'd love to get to a point where we're filling our own talent pipeline through through this work, right? I talked about if we could get closer to matching supply and demand. We are aware of what the skills of the future look like, which then translate to what should be our solid investment roles. Like, what are the roles that we know in the next 18 to 24 months will be difficult to find in the market because everybody is trying to hire those people. And given how complex our organization is, as I said before, the team that we have now is the team that we need. It takes longer to acquire talent from outside and get them to productivity, including the costs of acquisition that it requires. If instead that we can get to a place where we can forecast, and we do that, we accurately forecast demands the best that we can. So how many engineers do we think we're going to need next year? Supply is the hard one. Can we meet that demand? Just given how mature we are in the financial sector, we do find that we lose talent from some of our competitors because we are in the forefront. We're already on cloud. We're already doing generative AI, and so they get pulled away to rebuild something that they've done before here. So we know that that's going to happen. I would love to be in a position where we are readily able to forecast back to my talent acquisition partner to say, I can satisfy 25% of your demand for next year. Like, that would be a great aspirational state.
Yeah,
I completely second with what Ebele, sorry.
No,
No,
please.
I just completely second what Ebele mentioned, because workforce planning is very critical for any organizational success. So how could the learning teams effectively think about what talent strategies do you want to kind of adopt, learning strategies you want to adopt? How do you want to proactively build those pipelines which will help the business to fulfill their envisioned goals, business goals, strategic priorities to be kind of taken into consideration? I think that's the most important key factor where ROIs can be considered, and learning teams can actually proactively help, uh, at least solving, if not 100%, but probably 25 to 40% of the problems that workforce planning teams have.
Yeah, I'd say capacity planning is always top of mind. The time to competency was a great call out. In the support realm, there is attrition, right? And so you're constantly bringing in new people who are at varying levels of skills. Some are at the basic and they need to ramp up quickly, and others have some skill, and maybe it's just rounding the edges on that. I think understanding the capacity planning for the future, as well as kind of augmenting that with the product releases. So the new product releases, what's new that's coming out that everybody has to be trained on. Um, Pulling all of these data points together to have the right training at the right time that deliver the right skills, that would be amazing to have all of those data points to make the right decisions there.
Great. Let's in our remaining minutes, I'd love to have you all maybe share from your learnings and experiences, and thank you for sharing what you're doing today, what you aspire to do. When it comes to measuring ROI, having a business case, justifying the programs that you're all managing, perhaps to some of your peers who are watching and listening, what do you feel that those peers might be getting wrong, or what mistakes might they potentially make when it comes to measuring ROI and learning? What can you help them avoid? Any pitfalls or lessons learned from your experience?
I'd say I think of three things when I talk about evangelizing skilling. Um, the what? What are we talking about? Why is this important? What? How, what's in it for the stakeholders? And then the now what? What are we doing next, right? And so if you can cover those three bullets to really talk about why we've developed this, how this impacts your business, and how are we going to further this along, that tells such a great story and really helps people get interested in skilling.
Yes, I go back to my point of prioritizing what matters, and it's very important for the business leaders to also understand that they give us a complete, transparent, full blown picture. And that's why these deep conversations with them as to why, what, how does it matter? What will happen if we don't do this? Why do you want to do this? Who is going to use it? How is this going to impact the day job and the final outcomes? These are the leading questions that we have started asking. Sometimes people get a little um, uncomfortable, but it's very important for us to get those insights. Also, many a times leaders think about long term impact. They fail to envisage the long term impact and the gains, and most importantly metrics. It's very important for us to tie in with right metrics. What is the outcome that we are expecting by doing this as a learning offering, and what is it going to actually mitigate as a challenge? I think that has to be clearly defined. Measuring right metrics, measuring it across what's the priority, is something which we need to focus on, and that gets missed out.
And I'll just add holding the leaders accountable for the learning. I was very, very deliberate to say that my work is to provide infrastructure to a culture, the things around modality that we talked about. But at the end of the day, the leaders, the business, they drive their culture. They are accountable for prioritizing learning and the impacts for their organization. And so while we can help them shape what metrics they should be tracking, we can help them shape the programs, we can design and advise on the skills of the future. At the end of the day, I think where some in learning get hung up is that they feel is their responsibility to take each employee through the training, and they start tracking engagement and the number of people that do the training and whatnot. That's on the leader. At the end of the day, we are enabling the business through learning to achieve a goal. If the business wants to achieve that goal and learning is the path through it, then that leader and the business has to prioritize that. And so strong sponsorship for the very beginning is key. And that would be the, just, my advice for anyone who's trying to do this. You can get it all right, but you need to you need to emphasize for your leader that they are fully accountable for the organization, the culture of learning and delivering on it.
Yeah, I would say that, having the skin in the game is very important. And the business leaders definitely need to own it. We cannot measure the metrics. Maximum we do is elude the right needs, identify the right programs, curate the content appropriately, work very closely with the SMEs, and bring the most relevant things that are required by the learners. But ultimately, how are they put to practice? Are they implementing it or not? Are people who are learning things getting an opportunity to implement that learnings or not? Is this environment given or not? A lot of things depend upon the leaders themselves, and therefore they need to have the skin in the game when we define the metrics. It becomes much easier, more strategic.
Very good. How about any predictions for the future in terms of where you feel, and we'll look at it through the lens of ROI, of measurement of success, of building, maintaining, and articulating a business case. Any predictions on what you think companies might be asked to measure going forward, or your own companies might be asking you to measure going forward?
I think, along with these panelists here, skills are the direction that most companies are headed in. Capturing skills inventory, what skills are needed, comparing that to the content that you have, and then identifying the gaps. How do we identify what skills are needed and we have no content that we need to develop? And then, do we have the right skills? I think skills inventory is going to play a big part in many companies in the future here, and maintaining that skills inventory will be huge.
Yeah. And I would add that outcome-based metrics is also going to be the next important thing that the business are looking forward already for, and they would look for it in the upcoming future years to come, like increased innovations, better problem solving and comprehending skills, greater customer satisfaction. How do they drive things independently? Time to market. How do they expedite all of those? I think strong data-driven approach, outcome-based metrics, evolving skill demands, and how learning teams are able to map that proactively are some of the things that business would start asking for and look forward for.
I just agree with both. Ditto to all of those.
I've heard us say a couple of times, skills, a great evidence. I think you've used that term, Abella, and maybe that's an interesting, characteristic, right? Proof of skills, evidence of skills, something that can be measured, inferred, to again tie to business value. Just making a comment or an observation based on what you've said so far.
Yeah, I harp on evidencing of skills because I pulled that thread through to equity. I think I mentioned that earlier. How many times are we seeing at the end of the year? I joke, how many hours is lost for doing end of year reviews? If we were able to really pull that thread from skills to evidencing of skills, we can pre-populate the end of year review process, right? How wonderful would it be to see folks in your organization that are in one role, but you realize that they are proficient or at least have capabilities in other roles, maybe even roles that you have gaps in, right? And so I think evidencing of skills becomes very, very important. Greg, you've heard me say I'm not really a fan of assessing skills in the beginning. I'd rather evidence it and start with that as a baseline. And so I just think that there are so many wonderful things that we can do. Well, the future really does look bright when we start to think about evidencing and what we can achieve for our employees through that. I think we just create more opportunity, make things more equitable, and take away just systemic barriers that stay in place. I mean, one of them is just, the manager plays such a huge part in an employee's career journey. How much do you now diminish the role of the manager, which is not a bad thing. I think managers are overburdened, to be honest. But if you can take away that burden, because now you're able to evidence the skills for them, and then there are decisions that can come into play. We have things that we call like real-time promotions, right? You can now actually implement a real-time promotion because someone has evidenced a certain level of skills or competency in those skills. And so we might not be there yet, But that's why I talk about evidencing, because I just think about, as we think about the future, we think about the future of work. If you can start to just map those things together, create the infrastructure that can do that, integrate the systems, you know, I'm just very excited about what the future could look like once you get all those things right.
Yeah, that's great. I'm going to summarize a little bit of what I'm hearing too, because it's so important to, and you were saying this earlier, James, we have to get started, right? We have to start somewhere. We have to make sure that people are engaged, that they're consuming content, that they're taking the steps to learn and develop those skills. What I see in my role at Cloud Academy oftentimes is that companies may stop there. It's all about consumption metrics, usage metrics. Did people log in? Did they take a class? How much time did they spend? What I'm hearing from you all is maybe that's a starting point, but that in and of itself is not ROI. That does not a business case make. It's progressing from usage and utilization, which is important, right? That's step one. But the development of skills and evidence skills to the progression of, okay, how do we tie those skills to our business outcomes, whether directly or indirectly, but make the case that this is making a difference in the business. And if I captured that correctly, I think that's great for our audience to think about. Don't stop at the consumption, right? Don't stop at those basic usage metrics. Challenge yourselves, challenge your teams to continue, through that path to get to the real business outcomes. Okay, I think we have a couple of minutes for perhaps a couple of questions. I have one here that's already come in and queued up. So I think we've touched on this a little bit, but probably a reflection of our audience out there today is it sounds great, but there's resistance. There's adoption challenges. The things that you're describing, sound great in terms of that ROI, but how do you handle resistance, hesitation, whether the employee doesn't have time or is just skeptical of developing those skills? Do you have those situations in your own businesses? Company is addressing it.
Very much. I think all of us would be facing that kind of challenges where we want people to learn, but we can't release them because they have a day job to do. And that actually circles back to a point of learning culture. How are the leaders supporting this kind of a learning culture? Are they making time? Like at MasterCard, we have multiple other options, like we have Flex Fridays, we have meeting free days. People focus on ensuring that nobody's picking up calls, nobody's having meetings, but they are simply learning or doing something for their own growth. I think it's more driving and circling back to the learning culture that the organization holds as a DNA, and it has to be more importantly practiced. The behaviors have to be seen, implemented, top down approach, and that has to be supported. Only then it becomes possible. So it's a huge role that the leaders play in this entire journey. We can only create a lot of opportunities, but people are to be released. I have seen very classic case studies where infrastructure engineers in our organization, when they have to go for planning, when they have to go for some kind of learning opportunities, there's a well planned schedule. They are kept out of their work related stuff. They're pre-planned, and then we can't change those dates. We have to particularly work according to their. So there are a lot of things that managers who are really concerned about the growth and the learning of the people, who take this additional effort to release them out of their workloads and ensure that they go and upskill themselves, which will be a longer term benefit. So I think these practices have to be practiced, followed, and it cannot be only run of the mill kind of stuff, or it cannot just be philosophies and visions and mission statements. It has to be practiced in reality. We do a lot of it at MasterCard. Truly proud of, to see how leaders actually support this kind of culture.
I just want to, I couldn't agree more. It's the culture piece. It's really about, do you have a culture of learning? And employees can feel that, whether the culture exists and sometimes we have microcultures. And so maybe your organization might not have a culture of learning, but you might have a leader, a team that it's big in their team to do that, and it's being recognized and rewarded. You can also force it. So a force function that we did is that we added learning epics in Jira's. And so my other role is I'm Dean of Cloud, and one of my biggest priorities, or the biggest priority, is accelerating our migration. And so in accelerating our migration, what we've done is we've identified application teams that are targeted and committed to go onto the cloud. We know those who commit code on it, and we created epics. And within that epic, there are stories everything from the pre-migration to what you're doing in development, test, and production, and we can push or pull those in for our employees. Right now, we are doing the self-touch, so it's something that they can pull in. If we see not enough adoption or slowing in adoption, we could always pull it. And we're obviously looking at some of our other LMS systems as to how we can do it more broadly. And so, you can force that function, but just know it is a culture issue. And it goes back to I talked about the leaders and how they are accountable for that. And that's something that is sometimes broader than just us as learning leaders. You might have to kick that up the chain to see how you can create a campaign around a culture of learning.
Yeah. Plus one. I'd say that I heard this earlier, and I'll state it again. We have to make learning fun. We have to make it a priority for people, right? So whether that's different modalities, whether that's gamifying learning through our leaders, having a healthy competition, who can consume this training to completion first. And then it ends with the results, right? So like we can drive consumption, but if it's not moving the needle, then, we missed the point. And so, I agree. Let's start with the leaders. Let's make learning fun, and then let's show the value.
Yeah, and what I hear from some of our other customers as well, and you're all saying this, is the communication of all of that, right? So people understand why they're being asked to learn or improve or develop a new skill, and then closing the loop. Here's the effectiveness. Here's the key results and how we performed on those key results, so they can also feel it and experience it in their own role, in their own professional experience, but they can see how it's impacting the company, and that's a huge driver, right? So ROI.
But then also rewarding them for that learned skill, right, and the application of that skill too.
Right. Absolutely. Okay, well, it looks like we are right about at the end of our time today. So a huge thank you to the panelists. Thank you so much for sharing these insights. Thank you to our attendees for joining today. We hope you found it informational. We hope you got some good ideas and some good golden nuggets from this conversation. So before we end for today, again, a couple of reminders. The recording will be shared as soon as we have it available. You can expect it in email. You will receive that survey. So again, please complete that survey. Tell us what you like. Tell us where we can improve. And if you want to see more webinars similar in terms of best practices and great lessons and ideas, come to our website, cloudacademy.com webinars. You'll learn more. So again, thank you so much to the panelists. Everyone have a great rest of your day and evening, and we'll talk again soon. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.